Reinhard Heydrich. At 6 years old, my memories are barely a blur, just vague flashes of Legos and flashy dolls. Yet, at that same age in Germany, there was a child who had already cast aside toys. Instead, he focused entirely on gliding his skilled hands across piano keys, effortlessly reading and performing Mozart's most complex symphonies. It sounds admirable, doesn't it? But years later, those same hands, the ones that once conjured the beauty of high art, would pick up a pen and coldly sign the death warrants of tens of thousands of people. God created a prodigy, yet he didn't use music to save souls. Instead, he used it as the perfect camouflage for a bloodthirsty monster. While the world branded him the Butcher of Prague, he still saw himself as a maestro conducting a symphony of death known as the Final Solution. How could a man who possessed such a deep sensitivity to the exquisite beauty of music also design a literal hell on earth, orchestrating one of the most brutal and haunting chapters in human history? Join me as we unseal the file on Reinhard Heydrich, the Third Reich's violin-playing demon. Reinhard Heydrich was born on March 7, 1904 in Halle, Germany, into a family where high art and iron discipline walked hand in hand. His father was a renowned composer and opera singer. His mother was the daughter of a wealthy, high-status dynasty. From the moment he was born, his destiny seemed scripted for greatness. Even his name was stitched together from heroic figures in classic operas. The Heydrichs were social elites, possessing both significant wealth and status. Reinhard grew up surrounded by the sound of violins, high society concerts, and an upbringing so strict it was suffocating. He was the ultimate golden boy in the eyes of the aristocracy, a violin virtuoso, a skilled fencer, and an excellent swimmer. At this stage, there were no red flags, no glimpse of the dormant monster within. The young Heydrich was bright, talented, and cultured. Ambitious, certainly, but not yet dangerous. But a dark cloud followed Heydrich like a curse, rumors of Jewish ancestry. In an era where extreme nationalism was beginning to spark, merely being suspected of having Jewish blood was a humiliating verdict. He was constantly bullied and mocked by his peers, not just for the rumors, but for his high-pitched, almost feminine voice. They spun stories that his father's last name was actually Süß, a Jewish name. This humiliation didn't break Heydrich, it radicalized him. To prove he was a pure German, superior to everyone else, he joined anti-Semitic paramilitary organizations at the age of 15. He learned to hate the very thing people suspected lived inside him. Heydrich's future brutality was not born of courage, but of a cowardly need to deny his own identity. World War I came and went without leaving a physical mark on him. Like many of his generation, he was eager to fight, but too young to enlist, forced to watch the violence unfold from the sidelines of his hometown. In 1922, seeking financial stability for his family amidst the hyperinflation crisis, Heydrich joined the German Navy. There, he was a social pariah. Raised in a cultured home, playing the violin and shy by nature, he was an oddity among rough sailors, and the rumors of his Jewish blood persisted. Yet with razor-sharp intellect and iron discipline, he rose through the ranks like a meteor. He became a promising signals officer, promoted to ensign in 1926, and lieutenant just 2 years later. As his rank increased, he finally began to gain the recognition he craved, but the stripes on his uniform only fed his ambition and his arrogance. Tall, blonde, and blue-eyed, he was the living, breathing symbol of the Aryan race that Hitler dreamed of. He was haughty and a notorious womanizer. He thought his life was set, a career of naval expeditions followed by a comfortable pension. But fate had a different plan, and it delivered a brutal slap to his face. In 1931, the perfect machine made a fatal error. Heydrich was dishonorably discharged from the Navy for breaking a marriage promise to one woman in order to chase another, Lena von Osten. Lena was beautiful, but she was also a fanatical Nazi and a virulent anti-Semite. In an instant, Heydrich fell from the peak of prestige to rock bottom, unemployed, disgraced, and penniless. Cornered and desperate, Heydrich saw another door open. He joined the Nazi Party in Hamburg and enlisted in the SS. It was Lena, that fateful woman, who pushed him into the arms of Heinrich Himmler. This was the moment history pivoted. A disgraced ex-naval officer, nursing a grudge against society, carrying a false dossier about his origins, and possessing a heart full of hate, was finally ready to draw the blueprints for hell on earth. He no longer needed a violin to create beautiful music. He needed a filing system to control the life and death of millions. In 1931, Reinhard Heydrich walked into Heinrich Himmler's office looking like a man at the end of his rope. He had just been kicked out of the Navy, his honor shredded, and his pockets empty. But mark this moment well, for this was when one of history's most precise killing machines was switched on. Himmler, a man who worshipped discipline but lacked practical organizational skills, needed someone to build an intelligence service for the Nazi Party. The interview lasted exactly 20 minutes. In that short time, applying the logical mind of a naval officer and the cold precision of a fencer, Heydrich sketched out a perfect intelligence network right there on a scrap of paper. Himmler was completely sold and hired him on the spot. Heydrich's power and influence skyrocketed, fueled by Himmler's direct trust and recognition of his results. The unemployed young man soon officially became the head of the SD, the SS security service. Heydrich didn't just build an intelligence agency, he constructed a prison of files. He began compiling dossiers on everyone, from political opponents to fellow party members. Information was harvested for blackmail and political leverage. In Heydrich's hands, information became a silent, lethal weapon. In January 1933, when Hitler took power, Heydrich was like a shark in water. He and Himmler began an aggressive takeover of Germany's entire police apparatus, seizing control of the Munich police and then the political police of Bavaria. Around this time, Hermann Göring established the Gestapo as the Prussian secret police. When Göring transferred authority over the Gestapo to Himmler in April 1934, it immediately morphed into an instrument of terror under SS supervision. By 1934, Heydrich was appointed head of the Gestapo, turning it into a machine designed to sow absolute fear. Heydrich was the director operating in the shadows of the bloody purge known as the Night of the Long Knives. He fabricated evidence, accusing SA leader Ernst Röhm of plotting a coup, giving Hitler the pretext to wipe out the opposition in a single night. Blood flowed like rivers in the streets, and the man smiling in the background, having solidified the power of the SS, was Heydrich. The Gestapo held the authority to arrest citizens on mere suspicion, and they alone defined what constituted a crime. The Gestapo law, passed in 1936, gave the police extrajudicial power. This led to the rampant use of protective custody, Schutzhaft, the power to imprison citizens without trial. Courts were forbidden to investigate or interfere. As long as their actions reflected the will of the leadership, the Gestapo was considered legal. People were arrested arbitrarily, sent to concentration camps, or simply executed. While Heydrich wore the mask of a devoted family man, in reality, he was a womanizer who frequently dragged his subordinates into drunken debauchery in Berlin's red light districts. By June 17, 1936, all police forces across Germany were unified after Hitler appointed Himmler as chief of German police. With this move, Himmler and his deputy Heydrich became two of the most powerful men in the Reich's internal administration. From January 1937, Heydrich directed the SD to secretly monitor public opinion, using the Gestapo to search, arrest, and interrogate, thereby achieving total control over the populace. In February 1938, he pressured Austria through propaganda and staged Nazi demonstrations, contributing directly to the Anschluss on March 12, when Hitler annexed Austria. In 1939, Heydrich established the Stiftung Nordhab Foundation to acquire real estate for the SS. The Wannsee Villa purchased by this fund would later become the site of the 1942 Wannsee Conference, where Heydrich would preside over the planning of the deportation and extermination of the Jews. He became the head of the SIPO, security police. and the SD, climbing the ladder of a brutal empire step by step. His fanaticism became even more apparent when he left the Catholic Church, declaring the Church an enemy of the state. Historians regard Heydrich as the most terrifying figure within the Nazi elite. Hitler himself called him the man with the iron heart. He was one of the chief architects of the Holocaust in the early years of the war, answering only to Hitler, Göring, and Himmler on matters regarding the deportation and genocide of the Jews. The horrors of Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, in 1938, a tragedy etched into human history, took place under Heydrich's cold, calculated coordination. He ordered the police not to intervene as synagogues burned and directed the arrest of thousands of wealthy Jews and communists. But Heydrich's true and most savage talent lay in staging historical tragedies. Do you know why World War II exploded? It wasn't an accident. Heydrich personally directed Operation Himmler, a staged attack on the Gliwice radio station at the Polish border. He had prisoners dressed in Polish uniforms, shot them dead, and left their bodies at the scene as proof of an invasion. It was the perfect theater to justify Hitler's army trampling Poland, triggering the deadliest conflict in human history. By 1939, the violin-playing aristocrat had become the head of the RSHA, Reich Main Security Office, holding the reins of both the Gestapo and the SD. He was no longer just an officer. Every German, from high-ranking officials to commoners, knew that a single underline in Heydrich's files meant their life would end in a concentration camp with no return. Heydrich had proven his purity by becoming more brutal than any other Nazi. He had climbed to the peak using false dossiers, staged assassinations, and a heart as cold as steel. But little did he know, as he began designing the final solution for an entire race, fate was already composing a requiem specifically for him in Prague. In 1939, Heydrich ascended to the seat of ultimate power, director of the Reich Main Security Office, RSHA. By late August 1940, he was also named president of the International Criminal Police Commission, Interpol. His complete loss of humanity became glaringly obvious with the deployment of the Einsatzgruppen. These were special task forces that trailed the German army into Poland and the Soviet Union, 1941, with a single mission: to slaughter intellectuals, Jews, and communist officials. It is estimated that these death squads murdered over 2 million people. This bloodthirsty demon seemed addicted to the violence. Despite his high rank, Heydrich still joined the Luftwaffe, flying nearly 100 combat missions. In 1941, after being shot down on the Russian front, Hitler personally ordered him to stop flying to preserve his life. This recklessness showed that he didn't just order death from a desk. He needed to taste the danger himself, utterly disregarding his own safety. He didn't just hold blackmail files anymore. He held the lives of an entire continent in his hands. But the pinnacle of his cold-bloodedness, the thing that set him apart from every other butcher, was the Wannsee Conference in January 1942. Picture a quiet winter morning at a luxurious villa by a lake. There is fine wine, cigars, and gentlemen in crisp uniforms sitting around a large wooden table. The agenda was simple: find a final solution to the Jewish question in Europe. Many horrific proposals were discussed, including mass sterilization or deportation to Madagascar. At this table, Heydrich didn't scream, and he didn't pound his fist. With his signature high-pitched voice and the poised hands of a violinist, he presented the final solution. He proposed a system to transport Jews from every corner of Europe to concentration camps in Poland, working them to death to systematically and industrially exterminate 11 million people. Although the word "kill" was never explicitly spoken during the meeting, the implication was crystal clear. Anyone who survived the harsh conditions of the labor camps would be treated accordingly. Heydrich turned the genocide of millions into a clean administrative spreadsheet, a logistical plan to be optimized. This wasn't a fit of rage, it was a protocol of hell, drafted by a genius with a void where his soul should have been. In September 1941, Hitler sent his favorite son to Prague as the deputy protector of Bohemia and Moravia. Why Heydrich? Because Prague was a mess of strikes and resistance. He arrived not to negotiate, but to clean house. From this moment, the Butcher of Prague was born. The second he set foot in this poetic city, Heydrich declared martial law. He didn't need judges, he just needed lists. Hundreds were executed immediately as a deterrent. His nickname was born from the pools of blood that didn't have time to dry in the town squares. But Heydrich was a sly fox. He knew the iron fist alone wasn't enough. He employed a carrot and stick policy. With one hand, he signed execution orders for the resistance. With the other, he increased food rations and benefits for Czech workers to buy their loyalty. He wanted to turn Prague into a giant arms factory for the Reich by transforming its people into willing slaves. By this time, Heydrich's arrogance had reached its peak. He was so confident that he drove through the streets of Prague in an open-top, unarmored Mercedes without a police escort. He believed the fear he had sown was an impenetrable shield. He lived like an uncrowned king in Hradčany Castle, casually playing his violin in the evenings while the stench of death blanketed the city. He didn't know that while he was basking in the height of his power and luxury, Czech exiles in London had already drafted his death warrant. The blonde beast had gone too far, and fate was waiting for him at a hairpin turn on the streets of Prague. Imagine for a moment. The man Hitler called the man with the iron heart actually believed he was an untouchable god on the streets of Prague. That deadly overconfidence was the perfect trap, laid by fate at a single, sharp bend in the road. On the morning of May 27, 1942, Prague lay quiet under the Nazi jackboot. Heydrich, looking sharp in his uniform, stepped into his familiar open-top Mercedes for his daily commute. He took no escort. He used no armor. He held such contempt for the Czech rabble that he believed their fear alone was protection enough. He didn't know that just down the road, at a hairpin turn in the Liben suburb, two commandos, Jan Kubiš and Josef Gabčík, trained by British intelligence, were waiting to execute his death sentence. The tension peaked as the Mercedes slowed to hug the curve. Josef Gabčík stepped into the road, whipped a Sten gun from under his raincoat, and squeezed the trigger. But nothing but a dry click. The gun jammed. Time seemed to freeze. In that split second, instead of ordering his driver to floor it and escape, Heydrich made the most stupid mistake of his life. He ordered the car to stop and stood up to return fire. That wasn't bravery. It was the sheer arrogance of a man who believed death didn't dare touch him. Reacting instantly, Jan Kubiš tossed a grenade at the vehicle. A thunderous explosion ripped through the air, sending steel and dust flying. Heydrich was gravely wounded by the blast and shrapnel, yet he still tried to stand and shoot back. He didn't die right there on the pavement. However, debris from the car's upholstery, horsehair, and road dirt had blasted deep into his body, planting the seeds of a lethal infection. Heydrich was rushed to Bulovka Hospital in critical condition. For the next 8 days, Hitler's killing machine writhed in agony, battling raging sepsis. Lying there within 4 white walls, he was no longer the all-powerful Butcher of Prague. He was just a rotting piece of flesh. On June 4, 1942, Reinhard Heydrich was officially pronounced dead. He was killed by the very arrogance he had cultivated. He believed that fear would shield him forever. But he forgot one simple truth. When human beings are backed into a corner, they become far more dangerous than any dossier in the Gestapo's archives. Reinhard Heydrich's death was not a quick, clean ending with the bang of a gun. It was a humiliating, agonizing struggle within the walls of Bulovka Hospital. For a man who worshipped perfection and sterilization, his end was bitterly ironic. He was brought down by filth. Debris from the Mercedes upholstery, horsehair, and road dirt had blasted into his wounds, causing acute sepsis. The man with the iron heart lay there, gasping for air, his body literally rotting from the inside out until he finally expired on June 4, 1942. In Berlin, the Third Reich threw one of its most lavish state funerals to bid farewell to its favorite son. Adolf Hitler, a man who rarely showed public emotion, stood before the casket and eulogized him as the man with the iron heart. But behind the theatrical praise, Hitler was privately furious. He cursed Heydrich's stupidity and arrogance for daring to drive an open-top car, unescorted, through hostile territory. The Demon King's rage didn't end with a eulogy. As a blood sacrifice to Heydrich's ghost, the Nazis unleashed a storm of terror upon Czechoslovakia. Operating on a scorched earth mentality, they targeted the villages of Lidice and Ležáky. In a single night, the men were slaughtered, the women and children were herded into concentration camps, and the villages themselves were razed to the ground, literally erased from the map. Thousands of innocent Czechs paid with their lives for the death of one butcher. Yet Heydrich's darkest legacy wasn't the villages he destroyed, but a specific name: Operation Reinhard, Action Reinhard. Named to honor the man who drafted the plans at Wannsee. This was the deadliest phase of the Holocaust. Death camps like Treblinka, Sobibor, and Belzec were built with a singular purpose: the industrialized slaughter of Poland's Jews. Heydrich was dead, but his protocol of hell kept running, grinding millions of lives into dust in cold gas chambers. In the end, the man who sought to control a continent was buried at the Invalids Cemetery in Berlin. After the war, to prevent his resting place from becoming a shrine for neo-Nazis, all markers were removed, leaving him in an anonymous plot. Even as recently as 2019, his grave was dug up by mysterious thieves. They found nothing of value, just the rotting bones of a man cursed by history. Hitler christened him the man with the iron heart, yet Reinhard Heydrich fell before his deadly symphony could reach its finale. Ultimately, he was undone by a stupidity born of sheer arrogance, cruising through a city that loathed him in an open-top car without a single guard. Heydrich believed he controlled every note, even the rhythm of life and death for others. But he forgot that the very flies he despised were capable of tearing his spiderweb to shreds. Decades have passed, yet we still struggle to solve the riddle. How could a man whose soul stirred at the sublime beauty of Wagner also be capable of coldly industrializing the slaughter of millions of fellow human beings? Perhaps true evil doesn't always wear a demonic mask. Perhaps it hides behind the most cultured, intellectual, and elegant faces among us.